Hello, everyone. Welcome along, everyone who is joining us bang on time. Well done for that one. Thank you. Yeah, we're just going to be letting everyone in for the next couple of minutes. So, yeah, thanks for making it on time. Thanks for coming along on this Friday afternoon. Um, Hopefully, you've all got a bit of that Friday feeling. If you are here early, maybe you let us know how you're feeling this Friday with a little emoji in the chat. Feel free to let us know who you are, and a little emoji in the chat will always let us know kind of how you're feeling this Friday afternoon. So feel free to share those and say hello just as we're letting people in. You're always cool, Helena. We know that. Hi, Ellie. Hello, everyone else as well who's just joining us. Thanks for everyone for coming along. Yeah, feel free to stick an emoji in the chat. Let us know how you're feeling this Friday. We're just going to give it another minute or so as people are just joining us. There was quite a lot of people signed up, so yeah, we'll give as much time as we can for people to get through the door. Right, we'll just let this next batch of people in, and then we will get started. Right, thank you very much, everyone who's managed to join us so far. I'm sure there'll be more that will be kind of joining over time. So thank you to everyone who's been sharing their emojis and letting us know how they're feeling today. I think there's generally seems to be feeling quite a nice sunny happy, friendly mood in there. So that's good. I haven't seen any sort of sad faces or tears, which is a relief. Yeah. So thank you for joining us today. Thanks for choosing to spend some of your Friday lunchtime with us on this webinar. We really appreciate it, and it's lovely to have so many people here and joining. It's always nice not to be talking to yourself at things like this. So we really hope that you all find the next hour interesting, useful, as we're exploring the importance of inclusive storytelling today. We've got a really, really packed agenda for you today and a really star-studded lineup as well. So we'll say hello and introduce you to those speakers in just a second. But I just want to run through some tiny points of admin just to get us started. Live captions for this webinar will be available and are available in Teams. If you need the captions, go to the More button at the top in the tab and then go to Language and Speech, and you should be able to turn the captions on there. If you've got any issues, please do use the chat and we will do our best to solve those issues where we can. The webinar is being recorded so that we can share it with you afterwards along with the transcript. So we'll get that sent out to you afterwards so you can either share it with people or revisit it in your own time and at your own pace. And in terms of questions for our speakers today, please use the chat to put your questions in. What we will do is we will sort of run through all the speakers one after the other, and then we will collect all the questions to do at the end, and then we'll do a bit of Q&A at the end. But please do keep the questions coming in the chat. If we can answer them as we go, we will do as well. But yes, we'll certainly be collecting questions together, to do all those at the end as well. So just some quick introductions then. So if we've not met before, then hello, my name is James, and I run a communications consultancy called Turn the Page. And I deliver communications, campaigns, and training predominantly for the public and third sector, and all with a storytelling edge. So using the power of storytelling to increase our comms impact. My background is the fairly well trodden path from journalism to then in-house comms in the public sector. I then worked at a creative agency for a number of years before setting up Turn the Page around 18 months ago to put some of that storytelling experience to good use. So that is me, but let's say hello to our star guests today and get a quick hello from them. Um, so first up is someone who actually I learned a huge amount from in this particular area around inclusion when we worked together at our last agency, because she was studying for a master's in global cultures at the time. And is now working with culture experts, A Kind Life. So, hello, Lauren.
Hello, nice to see you all.
Hello. Are you all right today?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah,
Good,
there's a
good.
freezer full of ice cream, so can't complain.
We're all coming round to yours later then, in that case. Thank you for that. So we also have with us today Harshil Shah, who is the communications and campaigns lead at the London Borough of Waltham Forest, and has also graduated recently from the LG Comms Future Leaders Programme. So hello, Harshil, and congratulations.
Hi, James. Thank you. Yeah, very excited to see everyone on the call today and yeah, chat about storytelling, one of the most exciting things we can talk about.
I couldn't agree more, Harshal, but then I'm biased. So thank you for coming along today. And last but by no means least, we have Helena Hornby, who is Head of Community Collaboration at Social Engagement Experts, Orlo, and is also a co-DJ with me on a digital radio station called Fusion Radio. But Helena, we better not talk about that today or we'll just get totally sidetracked.
Yeah, if we go down that story to talk about music, that'll be our own form of storytelling for a whole hour, won't it, James? Yeah, it's lovely to be here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Looking forward to the session.
Brilliant stuff. So we will be hearing more from all of our speakers in just a sec, and they'll have a chance to introduce themselves a bit more. But yeah, I've been warned actually by Helena that I'm very good at talking too much. So the last thing I want to do with so many great speakers today is do that, talk too much. But I do just want to tee up today's session. And the first thing I want to say is that I am certainly not putting on this webinar today by claiming to be an authority on inclusion or inclusive storytelling at all. We will all be at different stages in our understanding and our journey in this particular area. And that is absolutely fine. And I think the most important thing is that we are all here to listen and learn more about it, through the experience and the knowledge of our speakers today. And certainly I put myself firmly in that category as well. But equally, the experience and the insights that we hear today are not going to be the only way of doing things either. We all come at this conversation with different ideas, different perspectives, and that is really important as well. But it is something I've really wanted to run a webinar on for quite a while, around this subject, because storytelling, is one of the most powerful tools we have in our comms toolkit. The ability to learn and understand through stories is one of the things that unites us as human beings, and that's why they're so important to us and so useful to us, particularly in this context around inclusion that we're talking about today. That ability for stories to unite us and create a shared understanding. So that's why I just wanted to start by sharing these visuals from a campaign called Age Without Limits, which is being run by the Centre for Aging Better. Number one, because it is a brilliant inclusion campaign in its own right. But I thought those call to actions at the bottom, in the bottom left, really sum up what storytelling can help us do when it comes to inclusion. So question it, challenging our perspectives, changing our perspectives, challenging it, yet again, changing that perspective, changing that perception, and then changing it, breaking down barriers, helping us to drive change. So today has been very much put together to show what that looks like in practice, real life case studies, focusing on the practical advice that will hopefully equip you to go and tell those stories that really matter. So that is enough of my talking. I'm now going to hand over to our first speaker. So Lauren, I will let you take over.
Thank you, James. I will share my screen. Can you see that? Nods of reassurance. Perfect. Thanks, James. So yeah, as as kindly introduced at the start, my name is Lauren Castle-Baker. My background's actually in equity, diversity and inclusion consultancy and internal comms. And I work with A Kind Life, so very much coming at things from a culture perspective. And in a nutshell, we support organisations, particularly NHS and public sector organisations, to create kinder workplace culture at pace and at scale. Why? Because kinder cultures lead to improved staff engagement and experience, improved well-being, increased productivity, stronger sense of belonging, which is one of the key themes of the session that I'll cover today. And of course, better outcomes for those that we serve as well. I'm going to kick off this section of the webinar by asking you a question. So if you can get your phones out, there is a Mentimeter QR code to scan in a second. I know you're probably eating your lunch with one hand, but grab your phone and scan this QR code. And what you should have pop up on your screen is a question, which is, why curiosity? Why bother asking questions? Why should we consider the benefits of curiosity, you know, to you, to your teams, to your organizations, and to your communities? So with any luck, your answers will start popping up on screen. Why curiosity? Yes, love this. The bigger the word, the more of you that are saying it. So yep, understanding, learning new ideas, empathy is definitely something that I'll be covering. Thinking outside the box, absolutely. Something huge in there around innovation as well. Knowledge, different perspectives, finding truth, that's a really good one. Getting a good hook, answers, learning opportunities, challenge, absolutely. Intelligence, again, something I'll be covering. Asking why, asking questions, absolutely. Really great contributions. Education, connection, yeah, absolutely. So as you can see from all of these brilliant words coming up on screen, there are so many benefits to being curious, to asking questions, to looking at things from new perspectives, to hearing people's stories. In fact, curiosity is linked to fewer decision-making errors. You're less likely to fall prey to confirmation bias and stereotyping people. It's associated with less defensive reactions to stress and less aggressive reactions to provocation. And as many of you said on that Mentimeter contribution, you know, it makes us more creative, it makes us more innovative, it gives us new ideas and new ways of looking at things. So on this webinar today, you know, whether you're in comms or OD or HR, when our curiosity is triggered, we think more deeply, more rationally, we come up with better suggestions and solutions. So I'm just going to get sciencey for a moment. Neuroscientists describe this process as exposing the brain to novelty. And the brain loves novelty because it means that we are learning. And so it rewards us with a spike in a chemical called dopamine, which is effectively our reward system. And dopamine does a lot of great things, but there are two in particular that I'll mention. Firstly, it stimulates neurogeneration, which is the growth of new brain cells. And secondly, it increases what's called synaptic plasticity, which basically means more flexible, faster connections between more brain cells, both of which are going to make us more intelligent. And a few of you had put, you know, greater intelligence, greater knowledge, more education on that Mentimeter. Clearly, you're all already a fantastically intelligent bunch, I'm sure, but I don't know about you, but I'd never say no to a bit more smarty pants energy. So, and I'm sure you can think of a few people that would benefit from that as well. So there are so many benefits to us on a kind of human level, but also on a kind of interconnected level with those that we interact with every day, you know, in our communities and our workplaces, to being curious. So how can we be more curious in our everyday work and everyday lives? And how can that lead to better insights and better stories? The question on your screen, how are you, is a seemingly simple one. You've probably said it thousands of times while walking past someone in the office or at the start of a Teams call, and not necessarily expecting a real answer. That happens all the time, but actually, when done right, this question is really, really powerful. So just take a moment to yourself to think about your answer to this question, just quietly and honestly. How are you? No, really, how are you? Asking people, how are you, and listening with empathy, another keyword that came up on that Mentimeter, is a radical act of kindness. It's one of the most inclusive things we can do, is being interested in other people, in their work, in their lives, in their world. And one of the simplest ways you can do that is to ask the question. This is a learned skill. Actually, it seems simple, but it is a learned skill. And we've taught it to hundreds of thousands of teams and leaders and line managers. And amongst other things, it can completely change the course of someone's day and completely change the way in which we interact as part of our culture in an organization or within a team. It can also lead you to uncovering helpful stories, different perspectives and insights. But to do that and to really get the benefits from that, the key is to truly listen. Not listening to interrupt, but listening to hear, no complaining or minimizing or fixing. Actually, one of the things that we find when we're speaking to different leaders and line managers across organizations is that actually entering into a conversation without the answers and solutions, that's true vulnerability. The healing can be in the hearing. We don't always have to only enter into conversations that we feel completely armed to solve. We can just listen. And it wouldn't be a webinar without a Brené Brown quote. So here's one. The courage to be vulnerable is about the courage to show up when you can't predict or control the outcome. So that really sort of summarizes that point. Perhaps you're thinking, well, look, listening, hearing what someone has to say about their world, their perspective, that's easy. I just sit there and listen, don't I? But actually, one study found that GPs overestimated the amount of time they spend listening, not by 100% or 200% or 300%, but by 700%. These are GPs as an example, but they thought they'd been listening to the patient for 7 minutes, but in fact, they'd only been listening for 1. Another study looked at doctors who had received dedicated training in listening. So, really sort of pertinent to the work that we do at Kind Life. And it observed them listening to patients explain their illness and their worries. But even with that sort of surface level training that they'd received internally, they'd interrupted after just 17 seconds in that conversation. So clearly, we need a bit of help when it comes to truly listening. We need a little bit of help when it comes to listening, not to interrupt or fix, but listening to listen. A distracted listener leaves the speaker more anxious, less self-aware, and more confused. But an empathetic listener, again, empathy being one of the key words that came up on that Mentimeter, that leaves the speaker with a more relaxed state of mind, greater self-awareness, attitude, complexity, different ideas and agency. And of course, only good things are going to come from that. Great stories, helpful insights that can guide us in implementing positive change, and the confidence and trust needed to speak up again and again next time to be able to continue that pattern. And it's true that, checking in, asking that question, how are you? Really, how are you? Builds belonging. From a workplace perspective, in the context that we work at A Kind Life, being curious and asking, how are you, is the #1 way to build belonging. So, ultimately, if you want to build belonging, gain helpful insights and stories, then be curious, ask questions, and listen with empathy. Creating a culture where people feel they belong, where they can contribute to their fullest potential. That's our work at A Kind Life. So I'll leave it there. If you're curious to learn a bit more about who we are and what we do drop us an email. But hopefully that's given you a good kind of overview of the power of curiosity, of asking questions, of gaining new insights and perspectives, and truly listening to the answers that people give you. So I will pass over to Harshil, who's going to talk through an amazing case study that he led on, bringing to life some of these key skills. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lauren. James, sorry, I don't know if you wanted to.
No, I
say
just
anything
worried, like you say, if you were on silent, mate, I was just going to jump in, but you're there, so that's fine. Yes, no, thank you, Lauren. Really, really appreciate that. And thanks for introducing us to the term synaptic plasticity on a Friday afternoon as well. We very much appreciate
I did practice that one a couple of times.
But no, absolutely, yeah, yeah, and I think hopefully everything that Lauren has just talked about, we're now going to see kind of in action as well. So Harshil, yeah, talk us through this amazing case study that you've got for us.
Yeah, hopefully I can demonstrate that I beat that record of 17 seconds. But yeah, we'll see. Can everyone see my presentation? Amazing. So yeah, as Lauren kindly stated, I am going to talk about Stories of Sanctuary, which is a storytelling series amplifying the voice of refugees, migrants, and people seeking sanctuary and the community that supports them. A bit of a mouthful. And yeah, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Harshil Shah. I work in the comms team at Waltham Forest Council as the comms and campaigns lead. And this campaign series has been one of like the best things I've been able to work on, and I'm like really proud of it. And yeah, very excited to share a bit about it with you all today. So yeah, just before I kind of like dive in, just a bit of a context and purpose. So as a council, we received Borough Sanctuary accreditation for Waltham Forest Council in December 2023 by the national charity City of Sanctuary UK. And that essentially means we have a commitment to supporting refugees and people seeking asylum. It kind of involves a partnership across statutory organisations, the voluntary and community sector, and people with lived experience of forced migration, who have all contributed to this kind of piece of work. And then, yeah, together a framework was created with priorities based around really important factors such as health and education. And one of the priorities is actually voice, essentially amplifying the voices of people with lived experience of forced migration. And that's where Stories of Sanctuary came in. To be honest, my initial kind of aim with this was just to spotlight and profile some really lovely human interest stories under this thinking. I'd produced a couple of like nice case studies that would make some great content for our channels. Working alongside my community's colleagues to identify some opportunities. As the series developed, so did some of the aims. So alongside helping residents connect emotionally with these stories, I also wanted to galvanize residents to a call to action, whether that be volunteering or contributing to a small organization or attending an event. But ultimately, like, the aim was to humanize the community and challenge harmful narratives often found in public discourse and the media. Obviously, as we've seen in the like being intensified in the last couple of years, all of this taking place within the wider context of community division, tension, violence, and increased hatred and stigmatization, unfortunately, to this community across the UK. And the approach essentially, so yeah, I worked alongside my amazing communities and resettlement colleagues who had those links in the communities, and were able to identify some really great storytelling opportunities for me. With this, I collected a series of real life case studies told through interviews, photography, audio, and video. And each story highlighted not only the challenges these individuals face, but also their hopes, resilience, and contributions. I'm not going to spend too much time on the next few slides. I don't want to make this a whole kind of comms Oasis campaign evaluation presentation, but I just wanted to share some of the lovely outputs. So yeah, the main chunk of the series sat on the stories page of our council website. So yeah, these are all the kind of collection of stories and amazing people and community groups that I was like very fortunate enough to interview and speak to and connect with on a human level. They were kind of each accompanied by social media posts and content. I just also wanted to like spotlight some of the beautiful kind of quotes that I kind of got from this series. So this is from an interview I did with Yaya, who's a migrant drop-in volunteer. So yeah, we have a kind of weekly migrant drop-in service where anyone who yeah has experience of forced migration or is a migrant can come in and yeah, just access support and be signposted to services essentially. And the volunteers are amazing. A lot of them, such as Yaya, have lived experience of forced migration as well. And yeah, they speak a range of kind of community languages as well. But yeah, part of this work as well was kind of forging this relationship and partnership with the charity Refugees at Home as well. And yeah, that was great actually, because I was able to forge this connection, and we were able to kind of help each other. So with Ed Knight, the comms manager at Refugees at Home, he was able to identify some volunteer hosts for me. Oh yeah, sorry, I should say as well, Refugees at Home are a charity where they kind of arrange short-term to medium-term placements for refugees in volunteer homes. And yeah, I got to speak to some amazing like volunteer hosts who opened up their homes for a little while. And yeah, I just thought this quote was so lovely. And yeah, this came up quite a lot as well around connection to like wider family, just the things that we have been kind of learnt. And yeah, just I just thought it so beautifully summed up some of the kind of the sentiment and essence around this campaign as well. And this is Anna on the bottom right. And this is Mother Rachel Summers on the top left, who, yeah, I'll come to a bit later on, but she hosted a Christmas gathering with her family and, yeah, some of the people that she's hosted as well. And again, I'll touch on this a bit later. Like, this wasn't like actually, I keep on like switching between calling this a campaign and a series. Technically, it's not a campaign, but yeah, just some kind of like outtakes and evaluations. So yeah, this is we got really great like feedback from the working relationship with Ed Knight at Refugees at Home. And yeah, using Orlo's fantastic kind of campaign analytics report builder, we saw some like really fantastic stats across our socials. This doesn't cover everything as we post some content natively to Instagram, but this yeah covers some of the kind of key wins from some of the case studies that I was able to share across socials. Now, the bit that you've probably all been waiting for, just some of the kind of like best practice tips and yeah, things that I kind of like learned working on this. So firstly, build good internal relationships. I can't stress how important this one is. They were the access I needed to have these conversations. Again, like I've said before, I'm so thankful to my colleagues in the communities and resettlement teams, and I've forged good working relationships with them over the years by demonstrating my passion and understanding of their service areas. This has meant that they trust me with their area of work. They have me in mind when they come across potential good news stories. They are the ones that have direct contact with VCS organizations working on the grounds, not me, who's like sitting in the corporate town hall. And yeah, they also like run some of our programs and services like the weekly migrant drop-in sessions that I mentioned before. And that's again how I was able to interview Yaya. That was literally kind of like on the spot, unplanned, after attending a drop-in session. where I had to capture content for another thing. And yeah, we were able to turn that around really quickly as well. Be prepared for the interview. Again, this sounds very obvious, but I think particularly with this series, I had to be very mindful of certain things that I wouldn't normally have had to, or but yeah, like ahead of the interview, check in with the relevant team, colleague, or person you're interviewing for any access or language needs, and to ensure that you can then speak slowly and use plain English. Which again, I think a lot of us do take for granted as well. English is a very hard language to learn, and it doesn't make sense at all, to be honest. So yeah, it is really important to just take that into account. Make sure like sending questions in advance. Sometimes you can use kind of like Google Translate or colleagues who speak community languages to again translate those just so they have like an understanding of like what topics you'll cover and things like that. And it's also good to check what topics are kind of off limits and not to be discussed. Having context of their current situation makes a big difference in handling the interview sensitively as well. I was speaking to some people who had made extremely difficult journeys and very traumatic journeys across countries to seek sanctuary. Some people were very open to speak about this, and others were understandably very hesitant. I also had a duty of care to keep a level of anonymity for safety reasons. Even if they were fine sharing details, I would never kind of share even first names or like countries of origin, like any kind of identifying information like that. Conducting interviews alongside trusted community sources and humanizing your organization. Again, linking back to the first point, this meant we could conduct some of the interviews together. So they had someone in the room they trusted. From the perspective of the person we are interviewing, we may come across as corporate and official. We're strangers with a camera, and it can be terrifying sometimes. Don't try and steer or manipulate the story. Again, in my early interviews and with previous comms activity, I was guilty of trying to extract sound bites, thinking about what would make a great standout quote or a 15-second golden nugget for an Instagram reel. It was only after I really started listening, again, linking back to what Lauren was talking about, and taking the time to appreciate the power in every word and every sentence, that I got an authentic response. I would like take the time again, like as Lauren said, asking how are you, taking time to build a bit of a rapport, make sure I was listening and not the one doing the talking. Again, it's really important to block out some time on both sides of the interview to make them feel comfortable. I sat with someone and spent time with them during their volunteering opportunity, and this took up quite a few hours, but honestly, it was worth the time. And yeah, just check in afterwards to make sure. Having a backup plan is really important as well, and I'll touch on this a bit later, but sometimes people can agree to an interview over email or something and then realize when they turn up that they don't want to be filmed. Again, that's completely fine, and we just need to kind of respect boundaries sometimes. Using my own experience of difference, being a queer person of color, I can definitely relate to being conscious around working with marginalized communities and sensitivities around this, and also conscious of how stories can be portrayed or stereotyped. Rather than dramatize or sensationalize, I wanted to highlight the human experiences people could relate to, like football, food, family, and friendship. This approach helped bring emotional depth and authenticity to the series. We weren't asking our audience to pity the individuals featured. We asked them to understand, relate, and care. And finally, tie it back to the organization's values and priorities. Many organizations will want to check what the point of the comms activity is, and good comms teams should already be doing this. By aligning our campaign with our core values of inclusion and welcome and embedding it in existing strategies and partnerships, we were able to maximize both reach and impact. Storytelling in content also has an important role to play, you know, for channel growth and reaching new audiences. So there's always value, I'd say. But just to caveat this, I totally understand this is easier said than done, especially with pushback from senior leaders or certain cabinet members. It can be really restrictive if working in a political organization, and I was lucky to work for and still work for an organization that and and serve a community that values the rights, dignity, and hopes of migrants, refugees, and those seeking asylum. But if you can highlight the impact of storytelling and sharing the stories of those living in your area or borough, it can go a long way. Again, I called it a series as opposed to a campaign. I sometimes interchange those words, but it literally started as a kind of couple of case studies. As I said, there was no budget put into this at all, apart from my time as an employee. And we provided vouchers to the participants as well, because I think that level of compensation is really important as well when you're using stories like that. No smart objectives were set. So yeah, I think like when I carry this on in the future, I think it would be good to kind of maybe like fine tune it a bit and nail it down in that regard, just so I can again more effectively measure the effectiveness of it in other ways, maybe using like benchmarking and audience sentiment a bit more as well. And I definitely wish I would have done a bit more video content. I recorded all of the interviews, and there were kind of but some of them I didn't use, and they were just written, but I think there were some creative things I could have done with using B-roll and overlaying it with kind of audio interview, maybe filming hands and different body parts. But yeah, ultimately, Stories of Sanctuary is a testament to the emotional power of storytelling when led with empathy and care. The campaign recognised people not as statistics or headlines, but as neighbours, friends, and fellow residents. And again, I'm so proud to have worked on this. Please do stay in touch. I love talking about this piece of work, and I'm really happy to chat to anyone further. If your organisation is a place of sanctuary, has a commitment to refugees, or not, and you're wanting to talk about how to navigate that. But yeah, please feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn or an email. And yeah, I just wanted to leave you all with this quote from Mother Rachel Summers, one of the volunteer host interviewed, and I think it just speaks volumes. So yeah, thank you.
Well, no, thank you, Harshal. You always know it's been a good presentation when the goosebumps on your arms start going up, which is exactly what's just happened to me. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, I've been so desperate to hear more about this campaign since I first read about it in the blog, which we've shared the link to the blog done on the Orlo site in the chat. So have a look at that as well. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the way you went about it, linking to Lauren's, pitch around listening, and you finding that you were kind of getting more insight and empathy and greater stories from people with that listening was just really, really interesting to hear. We are getting a few questions coming in, but we will definitely deal with those towards the end. So thank you so much, Harshal. And actually you touched on a couple of points at the end there around what you could do with it beyond the campaign that you've done around sentiment and tracking, which seems like a great opportunity to bring you in, Helena, to talk a bit about that.
It does, doesn't it? It's almost like we planned this. Thank you, James.
Never.
So hello, everybody. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm Helena. I work for Orlo as the head of community collaboration. And we initially got involved with this story. So Waltham Forest is a customer of Orlo, and I've seen mentions of us in the chat, and thanks for shouting us out. And yeah, when we heard from Harshal about this Stories of Sanctuary, we just thought it was a fantastic opportunity to give this a platform. Harshal wrote this blog for us, and for us it was an active choice to give it some reach. I think we've got hundreds of customers and a wide audience, and to be able to bring this to our platform was an opportunity to share best practice. It's such a great example of that audience first, human led comms. It can be quite a challenge to give a platform to this kind of potentially sensitive content. It's an editorial decision that that we make, and it's something that we believe in doing, and it does carry a certain responsibility to be able to do that in different ways. It's about the responsibility to the people whose stories they are, to Harshal and Waltham Forest as our Orlo customers, and to the communities that we work with as Orlo across the public sector. And it's also a really brilliant opportunity to shine light on best practice so that others can see that it is really possible to do this kind of storytelling that is really responsible and done with care and consideration to the people at the heart of the stories, which is always important whenever you're telling these valuable stories. So that's what I'm going to just quickly talk about today, is a bit more of the sort of how you can do that. I'm kind of zooming out a little bit. Lauren talked in quite a bit of detail about focusing on the people and those curious conversations, and Harshal zoomed out a little bit further to talk about the communities and these people with fantastic stories to tell. And I'm going to step out a little bit further again to sort of give you some practical help and advice on how you can do that. Now then, let's move on to the next one. So before you even sit down with someone together their story, as Harshal was saying, you have to do quite a lot of preparation around that. There's a listening job to be done at the community level to be able to tell the stories that are going to land. For me, it's important to find out what people are already saying about these communities, these topics, understand the tensions that are there within the communities, what narratives are out there about those communities that you want to represent. And if you understand that before you begin, it shapes how you tell those stories, how you frame them, how you approach the people involved, and also how you can anticipate the response of that when it goes out, when those stories go out. And Harshal mentioned benchmarking. If you capture that picture of the way things are before you start your storytelling campaign series, but it gives you that benchmark starting point so that you can then, once the campaign is live, you can listen to what's happening across the landscape, see what's shifting. Are people talking differently about it? Is the tone changing? Are more of these positive stories cutting through? And that is the evidence, and it's the data that you need, and how you go back to your organisation, relate it back to strategic plans, and also make a case for why doing this kind of storytelling work matters and why you should keep doing it. You don't need to go out there with a survey or a clipboard. You just need to pay attention to what the community is already saying before and afterwards. And it's definitely worth mentioning that if you don't have access to a dedicated listening tool, there are still great ways to do this, and it's about building it into the using free tools that are out there, building it into your comms plan and making sure you're doing that. Don't forget that AI can help with the analysis side of things as well. If you're doing manual searches and pulling some of the evidence of the comments and posts together, you can paste them into an AI tool and ask it to summarize themes and tones and patterns and things. It won't go and find the conversations for you, but it can help you make sense of what you've gathered, as long as you make sure that you check what it tells you rather than taking it at face value. If you've got Orlo as a platform, a lot of those tools are built into the listening and insights tools. AI tools are built in. Harshal briefly said, what he'd do differently next time around the benchmarking sides of things, and I think this is part of that. Having that data to underpin any campaign makes brilliant work. It's sort of even harder to argue with when you want to do more of it. So that's one of my big takeaways from today, is about doing this listening before you tell these stories, and then listening again afterwards, because the stories will do the work that you want them to do, but the listening is the proof point behind that. And I know that sounds easy, you know, I'm just being quite glib about it and saying, just start listening. And you might think it sounds great in theory. I know that people are doing listening in various states. You know, some are doing it quite casually, some are doing it in a more serious and structured way. But if you are not sure about where to actually start, here are just a few tips on how to get started with listening. And keeping it really simple is just going to the social platforms where these communities are and searching for the key topics that you want to listen to. Read about what people are saying about it. You don't need a tool for that. You can just get stuck into it with your own social channels if you've got social, and you need a bit of time and curiosity as well, as Lauren mentioned. I know that time is maybe the killer word there, but it is worth it, and it's worth investing in that. As I mentioned, the best listening comes when you do it repeatedly, rather than just going in there and taking a snapshot. Pick the topics or the particular author you want to listen to, or the communities, and set up a regular track and search for them. Maybe that's daily, weekly, monthly, over a set time, but make sure that you build up a pattern of conversation and insight and knowledge to give you some data to work from as you start to build your campaign or series. And set up alerts. It could be Google Alerts, for example, for the terms and the communities that are relevant to the stories that you want to tell and tied back to the strategic plan. You know, things like Google Alerts are free, pretty simple, and starts building that picture of what's being said so that it's getting triggered and you're not missing any gaps in the conversation. And then, of course, you can look at the data that you've already got. You know, there's a lot more data in organisations than you might realise. It's in your comments, it's in your DMs, it's coming in through the contact centres, it's coming in through feedback forms, it's coming in through social workers. There's lots of different ways that there is data that you can gather in. The listening is already underway in a way, but you might not just be treating it as data yet. So there's a real opportunity to start doing that. You know, Harshal mentioned the colleagues that he worked with that were such a valuable source of information, and tapping into the stories and the sentiment around that. So really do take advantage of breaking down the silos that we often have in organisations, and try and gather where that data is from. And then if you are ready to start then doing this at a bigger scale, that's when you can invest in a tool potentially. Social listening tools like ours that you can help you track the sentiment, identify patterns, build that benchmark that I talked about. That's the distinction between, you know, just searching for keywords versus understanding the broader narrative around a topic. You know, you might be looking for certain keywords, but the conversation that your communities might be using, it might be different. There might be nuances, slightly different words that you might not expect. And a tool like Orlo can pick up those that broader narrative. And that's really useful insight to have to help you make your stories more resonate more with the communities and speaking to them in the way that they're discussing an issue, and really help them frame those stories. So the important thing really to say is just get started with the listening, and then apply it to what it is, the stories that you want to tell, and that will give you the fantastic data that you can use as a benchmark to start telling these impactful stories. I haven't done a contact me slide because I do. You can contact me, just find me on LinkedIn or drop me an email, and I'm happy to chat about anything around Orlo, or just more broadly in general about social listening. You can find me quite easily. I'm all over LinkedIn, aren't I, James?
Yeah, you're not hard to find, Helena. Definitely not.
No.
People can even email in your radio show, but let's stop plugging that.
Yeah,
let's
stop.
Yeah. But that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think just a brilliant, you know, bringing a whole different context to listening. You know, we've talked about listening, you know, very much from the kind of human empathy point of view, but from a digital listening point of view as well, and how important that insight is to, like you say, to provide the context, to provide the, you know, information about what we're talking about and the stories we're telling. You know, yeah, just a brilliant another side to what we're trying to do. So thank you, Helena. Thanks so much for that. I'm aware that time is ticking away, and there's just a few little things that I just want to share just before we get into the questions. It very much talks to Harshal's point, where he was talking about having a backup plan. What are the different ways in which we can kind of still tell the stories if we find ourselves in a position where actually, the people or the subjects of the stories aren't keen to be involved. Because this is the question that probably, when I'm doing workshops, sessions like this, anything like this, one of the questions that probably comes up more than any other is that how do we tell our stories if people don't want to be in them? And it's, with the nature of some of the subjects that we're talking about and some of the subjects that we're dealing with, I think this is inevitable, as Harshal kind of outlined. So just want to share a few techniques and options that we can think about, that help us to share these sensitive stories if people aren't keen to be in them. If we've got the story and the subject is happy for us to share it, then we can sort of tell it in our own words, if you like. We can take their story and we can create a script and we can bring it to life with images. This was some short animations that I helped MK Council work on. They were doing a series of short animations, short stories to promote youth opportunities in Milton Keynes. And this is the story of a young carer that we had from the service, but we're able to just bring to life, just by using the words and the pictures. I hope people can sort of see and hear that. Just a really short, the story's there, but sort of just using, the words and the pictures that we can put together on the screen a different way. If animation and putting together video isn't there in terms of time, just using quotes on visuals and using them as sliders, works equally well as well. So just a different way of telling the story. If people are willing to maybe let their voice be used and be able to tell the story in their own words and voice, but maybe still don't want to be featured, in filming, voiceovers can be really powerful as well. This, I think, was a brilliant example from Devon and Cornwall Police of a police officer who had witnessed a fatal car crash and then had to share the news of the young man's death with his family. So, I think we can all sort of see the power there of having that person's voice on that clip. So if someone is willing to, provide their voice but doesn't want to be on camera, that is a brilliant example of the way of doing that. And I think what that is also a really good example of is, if we can't use the storyteller or the person whose story it is themselves, is there a different person who can help us to tell the story? Is there a different perspective on the story that we can use as well? Friends, relatives, professionals, as in the case there with the police officer, but maybe health or support workers, someone who the subject trusts, or even using our communities and our audiences as the storytellers and using user generated content. And the clip I'm just going to share is from a campaign called We Are Luton, which is running at the moment, which is running to kind of reclaim Luton's stories and combat some of those narratives that have already been talked around, these online narratives around racism, divisive misinformation, that have been spreading online in Luton. So the campaign is encouraging the sharing of stories of all the good things that are going on in Luton, these stories of hope, and reclaiming, that narrative. And it definitely helps when you have a chart-topping pop star like Miles Smith as well, who's from Luton. So there's loads of these little stories from the community, being driven by the community, combating, that information and that division that's being, generated online. So yeah, just a few other examples there, just a few ways that we can try and tell those stories, if people aren't keen to feature in them. But we are now fast accelerating towards 1 o'clock. So I just want to get into the questions, and feel free to fire more into the chat if you've got questions for any of our speakers. I'm just going to go back to one, Harshal, that actually links, I suppose, to that Luton clip that we just showed, which is around, the comments that we might get back, and the social media reaction to a campaign such as yours. Did you experience negative feedback online, to a campaign like that, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, unfortunately, because of the subject matter, yeah, we did. I'd say more so on like channels like Facebook and Nextdoor. On Instagram, it was like wholly positive, which was really like lovely to see. But yeah, we would get the kind of usual comments like, this is a waste of our kind of council tax money. What about supporting our own, quote unquote? I think, yeah, a few different things. Like, it's obviously really important to like respond with facts about like, yeah, maybe things around like cost. The idea of like different pots of money for different things can be quite hard to communicate to residents, but I think that can be quite effective as well. And also just the fact that like, just because we are supporting one cause doesn't mean that we aren't supporting others. I think it's like really important to have a very yeah, kind of like tight social media policy when it comes to responding to hate speech, which, yeah, like every, again, comms team should have, and like where you kind of draw the line between hiding comments, reporting users, and even banning users, because if someone is making like really insidious like hate speech and comments on your kind of profile, your organization's profile, like, do they have the right to access that information if they are causing harm to others who may be viewing those comments as well? So yeah, I think it's important to identify which comments are like insidious and which ones are maybe more curious, even if they might not be well intentioned. And yeah, I think just like responding to like comments like those curious ones is really important, as opposed to just leaving them unattended. I think if you respond further, like doubling down on your commitment, your values as an organization, you'll often find that other people will respect that more, and you'll get like overwhelming support in certain cases. Like, all councils should have values of inclusion, and I think, I say this to like comms teams a lot, and especially those on social media, look after yourselves as well. Like, be mindful of colleagues who are monitoring hate comments on a daily basis. I, for example, again, as someone from the LGBTQ community, was doing a lot of content around Pride Month, and I was actually responding to and monitoring a lot of hate comments, which was just damaging to me, like on a personal level. But then I spoke to my team, and we basically came up with an approach where, like, one of my colleagues, not from the community, would then respond to those. We would have pre-agreed lines, and yeah, that just helped me quite a lot. So I think, yeah, just being conscious of colleagues who are actually from those communities as well. Sorry, that was a lot, but I just wanted to get all that in.
No, it's all what we're here for, Harshal. No, absolutely brilliant. Thank you. And I think there are other people on the call I've noticed today who have, dealt with, trolls online, and comments like these in different ways, with their responses, with different campaigns as well. And if anyone wants any examples of those, then feel free to get in touch, because there's a lot of agencies now doing some really good work with kicking back against comments like these. So do ask the question. Lauren, I just want to pick up on the question actually around how are you? And Chris, thanks for sharing your story in the chat. When you sort of talk to people and you're working with people and you raise this point around how are you, kind of what is the reaction to that? And do you sort of see people with this light bulb moment and thinking, yeah, how important that is?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Chris, for sharing that as well. That's really helpful. I completely agree. There are some subtleties in the ways in which we can position that question, and asking how are you today gives people the kind of unwritten permission, I suppose, for the answer to that question to be different each day. And that enables a more kind of human-centered approach to the conversation. And people can know that when that question is asked again next time, their response can be different next time as well. But as a device, I suppose, that as a skill that we would teach like leaders and line managers, for example, in the context of organizational change, or building stronger relationships within their teams. It's really about giving people the confidence to ask that question and the skills needed to ask that question, and listen without fixing, listen without necessarily having to be equipped with the solution. Having that listening ear can help somebody feel like a little bit of that weight is taken off their shoulders, because they've been able just to talk and to be heard. And there will be other times where actually that question is asked in a more strategic way, with a particular topic or theme in mind, where we want to gain some insight about a particular topic or issue happening in the context of the organization or of that particular team. So yeah, it's a helpful question that can be shaped and molded, I think, in different ways. But ultimately, yes, giving people the permission to answer without expectation is really important. So thanks, Chris, for that.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I think there is. Yeah, I think certainly from our work, but also a personal perspective, I think that's something we can all reflect on, and certainly something that sort of hit home with me. I'm aware we're now already at the 1 o'clock time. I mean, people obviously feel free to stick around if there's any other further questions. Helena, there was just one I just wanted to throw to you just quickly, if anyone's able to stick around, which was kind of what you're seeing on Orlo, on your side of things, in relation to some of these comments that we've talked about, some of the conversations going on online, and then kind of how you can help organizations, or how you sort of work or feedback to organizations around some of that.
Yeah, thanks, James. It's really interesting. And we're seeing a lot of people struggling with the volume. We've talked about the trends that people have seen for much more keyboard warrior hatred, hiding behind the screens over recent years, and people surrounding themselves with that bubble of hate, and feeling like they can just spout that stuff and it's difficult for teams to handle. We see a lot more teams having codes of conduct, as Harshal mentioned, so that social media guidelines that is published either as a guidance or a policy on the website, so that the teams know where they can draw the line, and that they know that they've got the backing of the organisation and their team around them, an agreed procedure. And we've got some guidance on how to create one of those on our website. If anybody wants a link to it, just drop me a DM afterwards. I can send it, or just Google it. But about how to create a robust social media policy, so that as a team, and as an organisation, when you're going to say that's unacceptable, we won't accept that, and we will either take your conversation offline, we'll block you, we're going to delete your comment, and here's why. And something that Harshal mentioned earlier about engaging with people about the subject, and finding out about how people feel about it and are relating to it, and as I mentioned about listening to understanding the sentiment, if you can speak to people in the and address the issues that they are in the way that they're speaking about them, and come back to them rather than with your formal council policy, and speak to them person to person, often you can unpick some of the anxieties or tensions that are underlying those conversations with that negative person. And ideally you want to take that offline, but sometimes having that play out in a public arena can help, because it can help other people to see that you aren't willing to take that crap, and that you are standing up for yourselves and for these other people, and there's some sort of strength in that solidarity. And where we do see that happen, and people having the permission to be brave that way, it does often pay in positive shifts in sentiment and building trust with the communities who are the more marginalised communities, who see that they're being stood up for and supported. We do also see it's a worrying trend that that people are starting to say that they're going to turn off comments because they simply can't handle the volume of negative comments, or just generally of what's going on underneath some of these topics. And I've got a few ideas. It's probably a subject for a whole different webinar about how you can avoid doing that, because sometimes being seen to not encourage any kind of engagement is more of an avenue for creating distrust than it is for creating the conversation and the engagement. And it's something that we're trying to support teams not to do, but I totally get it when sometimes they do have to shut it down because they haven't got the capacity to be able to do that. We've got some work in progress using AI to be able to triage those kind of conversations and be able to respond to the most important ones that may be difficult situations, or most reputationally or most trust affecting, and it means that it's you're able then to engage on the things that you want and put your energies as a team into the things that will have the most impact for you and your team. I'm totally waffling, but there's, like I said, there's a whole other webinar in that potentially, but there are a lot of tools available out there to be able to do that. And if you are listening regularly to it, that you'll be able to pick up better on that. But I do realise that resources is a big issue for a lot of people.
No, but you're right. It's an interesting trend, and it's one that's so hard. I think having heard Harshal's experience of it and how other people are dealing with it, I think there is such power, like you say, in showing that front of solidarity, and that you are dealing with it and your values. And it's one I think that's definitely there. Like you say, there's a lot more we could say about it, but I realise we are now past 1 o'clock, and I realise people are having to start to drift away a bit. But I just want to say thank you to everyone who's held on, and thank you particularly obviously to our speakers today as well. So thank you so much, Helena. Thank you, Harshal. Thank you, Lauren. If what you've heard and seen today, has been useful and interesting, then you can find out a bit more about, some of the things that I do with training. There's a LinkedIn, get in touch on LinkedIn, and there's a YouTube channel as well where you can catch up on previous webinars if you've not been able to make it as well. But look, thank you, all our speakers. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks to everyone for sticking around with us on a Friday lunchtime, and I hope you all have a very lovely weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.